This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former House Speaker Joe Mavretic, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and John Hood from the John Locke Foundation. Well, this week on NC Spin, we look at the new leadership team the House has nominated. We talk about whether the North Carolina Department of Labor is doing its job and ask why, after 2 years of discussion, the legislature is still stuck on how to reform Medicaid. And, of course, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get started. Fresh off the heels of a renewed contract to run the legislature, House Republicans met and elected their new leadership team. The new House Speaker-elect is Cleveland County Representative Tim Moore, who served former House Speaker Tom Tillis as Rules Chair. In a WRAL-TV interview, the 44-year-old said, "We've righted the ship and dealt with what I considered to have been a hard left turn the state had taken in the years before the Republicans came to majority. What I think I'm hearing from the caucus and from the folks out there is they want to see us govern." The full House will confirm the slate when they convene in January, but if Republicans vote together, they should elect this new team. Joe Mavretic. Moore's message indicates we might not see more of the really strong social agenda the legislature has pushed the last 4 years, but might deal with more with the actual management of state government. You served as House Speaker in the legislature. How do you read Tim Moore's remarks?
Well, I think they're kind of fuzzy and intended to be. I think it's way too early for him to make pronouncements about what their 5 top topics are going to be. I think if you look at past assemblies with Dan Blue and Joe Hackney, both of them attorneys, I think you kind of get a sense of where this speaker will go. Neither one of those, however, were rules chairmen. And one of the things that a rules chairman does is bend the rules when the speaker needs it. And so the new speaker will know how to do that. And so I think it's going to be an interesting move.
Chris, it's been interesting after this election. You know, you start calling around, you start talking to people, and you ask them, what do you know about Tim Moore? Most folks say, well, he was House Rules Chair, and it sort of stops there. What do we know about him?
Well, he's been in the legislature, I guess, 12 years? I think 2002 he won from Gaston County, Kings Mountain. He's a lawyer. He was Rules Chair, as you mentioned. I think he has a sense of the institution. He's been in the news for making tough decisions as a Rules Chair. He had a couple blips in his legislative career. He was called out. He got the rural fund, the old rural fund that Billy Ray Hall ran, to actually give him money to renovate his law office, which caused some controversy. He later withdrew that. He's also been involved with the push to have a Catawba casino in his home area, yes, which is controversial. But otherwise, I think he's been a strong Republican legislator.
He's been an advocate for that new reservoir.
And the new reservoir, right. But so a lot of involvement with local issues. It's been interesting how that plays out in the session. But he was a loyal lieutenant for Tom Tillis and did, as Joe mentioned, the Rules Chair is a very powerful job where I'm sure he learned a lot.
John, obviously, as Speaker, he gets to name committee chairs. Any suspicion as to who might be named some of the key committee chairs?
I think that David Lewis is being talked about potentially as Rules Chairman, the role that Tim Moore had. It's interesting to notice that Tim is from Cleveland County, actually, but close to Gaston, the Kings Mountain area. He also includes Shelby. The majority leader, Mike Hager, is from the neighboring county, Rutherford County. These are leaders from the western part, not far west, but the western part of the state. That's something we haven't seen in a while. Of course, we used to have a longtime speaker from the western part of the state that's probably stayed a little too long, at least according to some. But, but I do think there's a geographic element. You know, we had a lot of leaders for a lot of years from the major urban areas, and now we've got in the House, not just those two men, but a number of other members, female and male, who have significant positions of power who are now from more rural areas.
Joe, is this going to be a changing of the guard? He's 44 years old. There are a lot of folks that have been there for a number of terms. You expect to see younger leadership or different leadership?
Well, I think clearly you'll see different leadership. I think one of the things that you ought to track is which members got contributions from the Speaker-elect.
And he raised a lot of money
he did,
on
in
behalf
fact,
of House
and that'll tell you volumes.
And he also went door to door and campaigned with them personally in their districts, which I think went a long way. But also remember, he clearly won, and I think everybody is rallying around him. But this was he barely made Speaker on the first ballot. He had 37. We've come to know 37 of the 73 people who were there. One person, Representative Cleveland's wife, was very ill and passed away, so he wasn't there. So, part of what he has to do, and Joe knows this better than anybody, is get the caucus together. There still are factions there that he has to work with.
While we're talking about team changes, we had a big announcement this past week. Commerce Secretary Sharon Decker announced her resignation. Diener Secretary John Scavarler is going to go and take her place. It was interesting. Governor McCrory got kind of choked up when he was making this announcement. I hadn't seen him doing that before, but he praised her pretty highly. What's everybody's assessment of Decker's contributions, John?
I think she was a very effective salesperson for North Carolina, which is largely what the Commerce Secretary does. There was a lot of rumor mongering about how there was some deep secret reason why this was going on. I don't believe that's correct. I think that, like other members of McCrory's administration, she only agreed to serve for a short period of time. She wasn't going to be there all 4 years, and she served probably a little longer than she had anticipated. John Scavarla moving over there makes sense. He has a lot of experience in business and will also be an effective person in that job. And therefore, the real question is who's going to be chosen.
I was going to say, any suggestions on who might be Diener's secretary now?
No, Representative Chuck McGrady, who's an environmentalist and a Republican, his name had been rumored, but he said on social media this week that he's not interested. I do agree that Secretary Decker has been very effective salesperson for North Carolina, but I think the governor made a couple times left her out there hung her out there to dry. She was going around the state saying, if we don't have a special session, we've got big problems, we're losing hundreds of jobs, this is a crisis. And she said basically did that twice, and neither time did the governor call a special session.
She was a good soldier.
Yes, she was a good soldier, and from my perspective, I think she was the best Commerce Secretary of the last 20 years.
All right, after these messages, we're going to come back and we're going to talk and ask the question, is the Labor Department doing its job? But in the meantime, you can have additional video content from our website, ncspin.com. Read and see NC Spin perspectives only on this website. Or you can catch us at NC Spin on Facebook, and we're tweeting at NC Spin Tweets. Balanced debate for the Old North State.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
My name is Bernie Teal. Sunburst Farms has been in my family for over 35 years. Last year I had to do something I'd never done before. Destroy 10 acres of good squash. I wasn't able to find enough workers. The opportunity is there. American families are demanding locally grown vegetables, and I want to provide that to them. So please tell Congress that we need immigration reform now.
I was asked by someone months ago, isn't Medicaid in North Carolina broken? And my answer was no. There are parts of it that need to be improved. There are parts that need to be changed. But the whole system's not broken. There are a lot of things that are working very well. What is working well is that we have a physician-led, physician-guided team effort. It's built on the concept of physicians having medical homes, patients having medical homes. And that system that we've created in North Carolina has done wonderful work. It has saved money, it's improved quality, and we have data that demonstrates that. That's what we need to retain. That's what we need to build upon. We don't need to replace that.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
One in 5 North Carolinians can't buy healthy foods in their communities, increasing their risk of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some forms of cancer. Learn more at accesshealthyfoodsnc.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
The News and Observer and Charlotte Observer ran an investigative series regarding contractors who weren't paying employees what they were due. Their focus has turned to investigating the North Carolina Department of Labor, the state agency charged with making sure working conditions are safe, companies are following the laws, and that those employers who don't are exposed, fined, and or taken to court. The reports show that in the past 5 years, Commissioner Cherie Berry's department has filed lawsuits against only 4 companies to recoup wages owed to workers, and that in this past year, more than half the roughly 4,000 employees who asked for help actually got it. John, most people know Cherie Berry as the elevator lady because they see her picture in elevators across the state, but the N&O ran an editorial saying she clearly isn't doing her job. What's your response to this?
Well, I think that the investigative series did identify some areas where the Labor Department needs to do more or be more aggressive, but it's important not to evaluate the effectiveness of the system based upon how many lawsuits are filed against companies. Unfortunately, some of these companies have no asset. The whole point here, some of these companies are marginal at best. They go out of business or it's hard to find them. And if you were to sue them, you wouldn't get anything. So lawsuits filed is, in my opinion, not really the right metric. The right metric is, can you detect these problems? Can you get workers what they're owed? And are you aggressively pursuing these cases? But sometimes you'll never get what they're owed because the companies go out of business.
Joe, the editorial assumed a position that it was the department's job to catch employers doing wrong and either fine them or take them to court. This is pretty much a Democratic Party approach to the whole issue of regulation. Cherie Berry says the department should tread lightly in the affairs of people and businesses, and that she favors working with these businesses in consultation rather than confrontation.
I think she's absolutely right. Not only that, but I think her predecessor established that precedent within the Department of Labor. This is not a Republican issue. This has been a Democratic issue as well as a Republican issue. And the name of the game was help them do better, not try to take them to court and win some awards. So I think, and also you have to think about priorities of effort within the Department of Labor.
Yeah, this is a department that's got 400 people and a total budget of $33 million.
Yeah, but the point is that they established what their priority of effort was from a worker safety point of view, which I think clearly is the most important thing, and prior Department of Labor chairman have done exactly the same thing.
Chris, one of the things that was interesting in this series is they found a number of contractors who were hiring people as outside contractors rather than as employees, and they weren't getting benefits and they weren't being paid workers' comp benefits and so forth like that. What's wrong with companies treating employees on a contract basis rather than full-time?
Well, because they're really the full-time employees, and they're just using this paperwork. There are no taxes deducted. They're not paying their taxes, much less their health care benefits. The state is losing millions of dollars. But you know, the latest story that we're talking about here, I don't think you should judge necessarily a labor commissioner on how many lawsuits he or she files either, but I do think it's fair to ask why, and the News Observer identified, we have a lot of workers in North Carolina who have worked and who are not getting paid. Somebody has to fix that and address it. Right now it's under the Department of Labor. If the Department of Labor doesn't have enough people to fix it, the labor commissioner needs to go to the legislature and say, I need some more people to fix this. People are getting literally money stolen from them. That's what this is. You work and you're supposed to get paid and you don't get paid. Money has been stolen from you. That's a crime. And somebody needs to address it. And I don't think this current labor commissioner is either doing that job or going to the legislature and saying, I don't have enough resources to do it. One of those two things has to happen.
Tom, what I was getting at is the question you asked. I think the area that they do identify a problem here that needs to be addressed is the issue of abusing independent contracting. of course, all companies use vendors, contractors for various things, and that's fine. But if you have somebody that, I mean, there are certain tests under the law that determine whether you appropriately consider someone an independent contractor. Does that person have an office supervised by employees, fixed schedule, fixed work? You know, at some point, this is an evasion technique, and that is something that somebody has to police.
Not only that, Tom, but this evasion technique is taught as a principle of management in our schools of management in our universities in North Carolina.
Is that so?
Absolutely.
Wow. After these messages, we're going to talk about Medicaid reform. Still stuck.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
The best part about being a member of a Touchstone Energy Cooperative is that it's your Touchstone Energy Cooperative. Learn more about the power of your co-op membership at TogetherWeSave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Do you love the history and art of North Carolina? Then you'll want a copy of Southport's Art Newton, a stunning 160-page coffee table book filled with the beautiful watercolors of coastal Carolina artist Art Newton. Southport's Art Newton was published by Southport native and noted North Carolinian Tommy Harrelson, and is filled with brilliant paintings of the buildings, boats, and beaches of southeastern Carolina. Look for Southport's Art Newton at local bookstores across the state or purchase it online at Amazon.
We now return to NC Spin.
When the legislature adjourned this summer, the expectation was lawmakers would come together and devise a Medicaid reform plan. There was even some speculation Governor McCrory would call a special session to pass the legislation prior to the end of this year. But a joint legislative committee meeting this past week demonstrated the House and Senate are as far apart as ever regarding how to provide budget predictability and contain costs with Medicaid. Chris, you follow health care issues fairly closely. What's holding up an agreement on Medicaid reform?
Well, I think two different approaches. What's fascinating to me is that some of the people, the leadership in the Senate, for example, I think believes that after this study commission, after all this talk, after last session, a lot of talk at the end of the session, we're pretty much back to where we were at the beginning of this whole discussion. The Senate prefers a more market-oriented, managed care approach with outside vendors bidding on these services, which has happened in some other states. I don't think that's a good idea, but that's a Senate position. The current House leadership, the outgoing House leadership, and the governor is much more into the accountable care organizations building on Community Care of North Carolina, which is a different model, also looking for cost containments and the rest of it. I was fascinated by this vote in this committee. Representative Nelson Dollar voted against it. But Representative Justin Burr, who I think may be in the House leadership, actually voted for it, made the motion for it. Representative Marilyn Avila voted against it. So there is clearly still a House-Senate divide. I'm not sure this study committee did much of anything.
John, the big issue seems to be risk. Who's going to assume the risk?
Against financial risk, that's it. And in fact, there is some movement between the two sides towards the center. In other words, some of the accountable care organization, and look, let's not dress this up. These are basically associations of providers, hospitals, physician practices. Some of them say that in a few years, they would feel comfortable taking financial risk. So this is actually less a debate about whether contractors should have financial risk, but when they should have it.
Joe, one of the things that I found interesting is that the Senate, according to the News and Observer, says that they want to relegate Medicaid to another state agency, and the News and Observer says it's the Department of Not Operated by Aldona Vosh. The House and the governor say this doesn't make any sense. Is the Senate holding out for this? How big a problem is this?
Oh, yeah, I think the Senate in the past has clearly shown that it believes that, or they believe that if they put their position out and stick with their position, that time is on their side. that the caving is going to occur in the House or
so
in the
they're willing to
executive
hold
branch.
out until...
And I think they're willing to hold out to get as much as possible.
So is that what's going to happen?
Well, I don't know. I was also interested in that unusual tension still remains between the Senate leadership, and there were some very harsh words at a committee, but towards Secretary Vosch by Senator Tommy Tucker, and so there's still a lot of tension. There's still a lot of distrust, especially in the Senate leadership, and the governor has to address that, or the Senate's never going to move.
All right. Well, we've been talking about it 2 years. I think it's time to fix it. That's my column this week. We'll come back after these messages. We're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today. One in 5 North Carolinians can't buy healthy foods in their communities, increasing their risk of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some forms of cancer. Learn more at accesshealthyfoodsnc.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
Somebody approached me over the Thanksgiving holiday, says, this is the favorite part of my show. I can't wait till you get to the point where you ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. John Hood, we'll start with you.
Tom, I fear you've set the expectations too high for the quality of what I'm about to say. But there is a new study out from the National Council on Teacher Quality. It is the first of its kind national study of, I think, 130 school districts, the major school districts in the country, looking at teacher pay, adjusting for all the relevant factors, including cost of living, and looking at how quickly teachers move up their steps, because it actually varies drastically from place to place. When you do the proper adjustments and you do a lifetime average earnings for teachers, North Carolina's school districts, which in this case are Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Wake, and Guilford, don't rank at the bottom. They rank below average. The worst system in the country for teacher pay, believe it or not, is New York City, because it is so expensive that the teacher pay, though nominally higher, is actually very low by national standards.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
It's pretty unusual, I think, when you can find an administration or find something the administration has completely misled, almost been dishonest about, and we had one of those recently. You remember we talked a little bit about, there was a meeting in North Carolina, Governor McCrory called on offshore drilling, to study offshore drilling for natural gas and oil off the North Carolina coast. That was a closed meeting. The reporters and environmentalists said, why won't you let us in? The Department of Environment and Natural Resources sent a letter saying, we're not letting oil industry groups in or environmentalists in because we don't want special interests here. These are just government officials. Well, it comes to find out now the oil industry was there, participated on the panel. 2 different oil industry groups were there. There's clear evidence, email evidence, and everything else, which was reported in Time magazine of all places. So the McCrory administration completely and intentionally misled us about who was in a meeting they claimed was closed.
Joe, tell us something we don't know.
Last week, Chris put out some disturbing numbers about children in North Carolina. Well, the truth is that biological parents in the majority in North Carolina really don't care much about children. I've done some research, and in North Carolina today, a child born, 3 out of 7 will not reach their majority living in a home with their biological parents. Said another way, statistically, at least 70% of the children born in North Carolina today will not have their 18th birthday in the home of their biological parents.
Wow.
Now, with that kind of statistics, and this is long term, North Carolina is going to continue to be a big, poor state for a long time, and there's really very little that government can do to correct this problem. We don't love our children.
Interesting. A very interesting stance on this. All right, so we're talking about the new House Speaker. We're talking about the new term. I got about 15, 20 seconds. What are the big issues the legislature is going to tackle in 2015? John?
Well, they're going to be doing a budget, the governor's first budget that he actually develops, and then I think education and teacher compensation will continue to be an issue.
Joe?
I hope it's the retirement package and also the liability of vacation days.
Chris?
I think we're going to see clamoring for some more on coal ash, more movement on coal ash. I do think the budget, of course, defines every session. I think there'll be a shortfall. The question is how big and how they'll solve it.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read our weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch us on Facebook. We hope you'll join us next week when we take on more issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.